The stars burned with the light of war. In the vast darkness between worlds, two mighty fleets faced each other across the void. The HFY ships looked like living things. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and their weapons were grown rather than built. Across from them, the Zephyrian vessels glittered like crystal cathedrals, their energy shields casting rainbow patterns against the black. Queen Admiral Theska stood on the bridge of her flagship, her forearms crossed in ritual combat stance. Her chitinous skin gleamed purple-black under the ship's organic lighting. The HFY had been fighting this war since before her grandmother's grandmother was hatched. Every HFY child learned to hate the crystal-skinned Zephyrians from birth. On the other side of the battlefield, Fleet Coordinator Vexthal floated in his command sphere, his crystalline body refracting the light of distant stars. His people had fought the bug-like HFY for 3,000 years. The reasons why the war started had been lost to history, but the hatred remained fresh. Every Zephyrian knew that the HFY were monsters who deserved only death. The two fleets had been circling each other for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Hundreds of ships on each side carrying millions of warriors all ready to die for their cause. This was just one battle in a war that spanned dozens of star systems. While they fought here, other battles raged in distant sectors. The war never stopped, never paused, never showed mercy. Far away on the galactic capital world of Concordia, the Galactic Council watched the reports with tired resignation. 12 species sat around a great circular table, their ambassadors sharing the same look of defeat. They had tried everything to stop this war. Peace treaties, trade agreements, prisoner exchanges, cultural programs, nothing worked. Ambassador Kelthrin of the Aquarian Collective spoke first, his gills fluttering with exhaustion. The latest mediation attempt has failed. The HFY delegation walked out when the Zephyrians suggested limiting bioweapon research, and the Zephyrians left when the HFY refused to discuss. Crystal mining rights, added Counselor Vrax of the Titan Union, his rocky skin grinding as he shifted in his seat. 15 mediators have died trying to broker peace between these two species. 15 good people, lost for nothing. The Vorthak representative, a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering field, pulsed with frustration. We have sent our best diplomats, our wisest philosophers, our most skilled negotiators. Every attempt ends the same way, with more death and destruction. High Counselor Meridia, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Council 3 millennia ago, raised one of her 6 hands for silence. Her voice carried the weight of ages. The time has come to accept the truth. Some conflicts cannot be resolved. Some wounds run too deep to heal. We declare the HFY-Zephyrian conflict to be irreconcilable. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council would no longer attempt to mediate the war. Ships carrying the Council's seal would avoid the war zones entirely. Any species wanting to trade with either empire would have to choose sides. The galaxy's most devastating conflict would be allowed to burn itself out, no matter how long it took or how many died in the process. The decision sent ripples across known space. Some species quietly celebrated, no longer having to pretend they cared about ending the war. Others mourned the loss of hope for peace, but most simply went about their business, treating the announcement as confirmation of what everyone already knew. The HFY and Zephyrians would fight until one side was completely destroyed. Meanwhile, in a distant spiral arm that most galactic maps marked as unexplored space, humanity was taking its first tentative steps into the wider universe. Earth had only been part of galactic civilization for 50 years, and humans were still considered newcomers by most established species. Their ships were small, their technology primitive by galactic standards, and their territory consisted of just 12 star systems. But humans had something that set them apart from other species. They refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. Where other species saw ancient hatred and irreconcilable differences, humans saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. They had ended their own devastating wars through diplomacy and determination. They believed that any conflict could be resolved if the right approach was found. Of course, most galactic powers barely knew humans existed. Earth's representatives to the Galactic Council were ignored during important discussions. Human trade ships were often mistaken for cargo vessels from more established species. When humans did interact with other civilizations, they were usually dismissed as naive idealists who didn't understand how the real galaxy worked. This attitude suited humanity just fine. While other species argued and plotted in the council chambers, humans quietly built their strength. Their shipyards worked around the clock, their scientists pushed the boundaries of technology, and their military trained for conflicts they hoped would never come. Earth's leaders had learned from watching galactic politics that sometimes the best way to be heard was to speak softly and carry a very big stick. Captain Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel UES Meridian represented the best of humanity's space fleet. She had served in Earth's colonial navy for 15 years, working her way up from junior officer to ship commander through skill and determination. Her crew of 63 men and women were volunteers, chosen for their expertise and their shared belief that humanity had something important to contribute to galactic civilization. The Meridian was on a long-range survey mission, mapping star systems in the unexplored regions beyond human space. It was dangerous work. They never knew what they might find in uncharted territory, hostile alien species, deadly space phenomena, or worse. But Captain Chen and her crew pushed forward, driven by humanity's ancient urge to explore and discover. They had been traveling for 6 months when they detected the massive energy signatures ahead. Long-range sensors showed 2 enormous fleets locked in battle, their weapons lighting up space like a deadly fireworks display. Any sane captain would have turned around immediately and reported the discovery to Fleet Command. War zones were places where small exploration ships went to die, but Captain Chen was not just any captain. She was human, and humans had a terrible habit of rushing toward danger when other people needed help. As she watched the battle unfold on her tactical display, she saw escape pods being ejected from damaged ships, saw warriors from both sides dying in the cold vacuum of space, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She ordered her ship toward the battle zone. The war between the Kethvar and Zephyrians had been declared unsolvable by the greatest minds in the galaxy. 15 experienced mediators had died trying to broker peace. The Galactic Council had given up hope and washed their hands of the entire conflict. But Captain Sarah Chen had never read those reports. She only saw people dying who might be saved, and that was enough. The UES Meridian accelerated toward its date with destiny, carrying with it the hopes and determination of a species that refused to believe any problem was too big to solve. The eternal war was about to meet humanity, and neither would ever be the same. The UES Meridian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the battle zone, and Captain Sarah Chen immediately understood why the Galactic Council had given up on ending this war. The scope of destruction was beyond anything she had seen in her military career. Hundreds of ships battled across a sphere of space larger than Earth's entire solar system. Debris fields from destroyed vessels created deadly obstacle courses that smaller ships had to navigate carefully. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the navigation station. "How long have they been fighting?" "According to the database, over 3,000 years, replied Dr. Kim, the ship's science officer. Her voice was steady, but Chen could see the shock in her eyes. The energy readings suggest they've been at full combat intensity for at least 6 days straight. Chen studied the tactical display, watching as bioships launched swarms of living missiles at crystal vessels that responded with beams of pure energy. Both sides were taking heavy casualties, but neither showed any sign of backing down. The sheer waste of life and resources made her sick. "Captain," called Ensign Torres from communications, "I'm picking up distress signals from escape pods throughout the battlefield. Dozens of them from both sides. Some of the life signs are getting weak." That settled it for Chen. She had joined Earth's space fleet to explore and protect, not to stand by and watch people die. "I'll stop battle stations, but keep weapons powered down. I want our intentions clear, Captain." Rodriguez looked confused. "We're not seriously going into that battlefield, are we?" "We're going to do what humans do best," Chen replied, her voice firm with conviction. "We're going to help people who need help, regardless of what species they belong to or what war they're fighting." The Meridian's crew moved with practiced efficiency. Dr. Kim began preparing the medical bay for multiple species, using the ship's xenobiology database to set up treatment areas for both Kethvar and Zephyrian physiology. Engineering teams prepared emergency life support systems. Marines stood ready to assist with rescue operations. Chen opened a channel on all frequencies, broadcasting in Galactic Standard and every other language in the ship's translation matrix. "Attention all vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Meridian. We are requesting immediate ceasefire to allow search and rescue operations for survivors from both fleets. We have medical facilities standing by and request your cooperation in saving lives." The response was immediate and chaotic. Angry transmissions flooded the communications array from both sides, demanding to know who the humans thought they were and what they were doing in a restricted war zone. Several ships from each fleet began moving to intercept the Meridian, their weapons charging. On the Kethvar flagship, Queen Admiral Thessica stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. "What species is this? I have never seen ship designs like theirs." Her tactical officer, a young warrior named Krexth, consulted his database. "Unknown, Your Magnificence. The computer cannot identify their origin, but their ships appear to be primitive by our standards. Kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion, basic energy shields. And they want to rescue Zephyrian survivors?" Thessica's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why would any species risk themselves for our enemies? Across the battlefield, Fleet Coordinator Vexthul was having similar thoughts. His crystalline form flickered with patterns of bewilderment as he reviewed the human transmission. "They wish to treat our wounded alongside Kethvar casualties. This makes no sense. Are they allies of the bugs?" His aide, a young Zephyrian named Scythex, pulsed with uncertainty. "Unknown, Coordinator. Our intelligence has no record of this Earth or these humans, but their behavior suggests they are either insane or operating under some cultural imperative we do not understand." Both commanders faced the same dilemma. The unknown vessels were clearly no military threat. Their primitive technology could be destroyed easily, but their stated mission was so unprecedented that it created confusion in the ranks. Warriors who had spent their entire lives fighting the enemy suddenly faced the prospect of watching aliens rescue those same enemies. "Captain." Chen watched the tactical display as ships from both fleets continued to approach. She had expected hostility, but she also knew that curiosity was a universal trait among intelligent species. Her gamble was that the alien commanders would want to understand human intentions before taking action. "Captain, we're being hailed by both flagships," reported Ensign Torres. "They're demanding explanations for our presence." "Put them both on screen simultaneously," Chen ordered. "Let's see if we can start a conversation." The main viewer split to show two very different alien faces. On the left, Queen Admiral Thessica's insectoid features were arranged in what Chen's training suggested was a threat display. On the right, Fleet Coordinator Vexthul's crystalline form flickered with patterns that the computer translated as aggressive inquiry. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of Earth," she began, standing straight and speaking clearly. "We detected your battle and the resulting casualties. Our ship is equipped with medical facilities capable of treating both your species. We request permission to conduct search and rescue operations in the combat zone." Thessica spoke first, her translated voice harsh with suspicion. "Why would you risk your ship for beings you do not know? What do you gain from this?" "Nothing," Chen replied honestly. "We gain nothing except the knowledge that we help save lives. Where I come from, we believe that all intelligent life has value, regardless of species or political affiliation." Vexthul's form pulsed rapidly. "You would treat Kethvar wounded with the same care as Zephyrian wounded? Even knowing they are our mortal enemies?" "Medical treatment is not about politics," Chen said firmly. "It's about preserving life. Our doctors have sworn to help anyone who needs help, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Both alien commanders were silent for long moments, processing this incomprehensible information. Finally, Thessica spoke again. "You claim to be neutral in our conflict?" "We claim to be human," Chen replied. "We don't know enough about your conflict to take sides, and frankly, we don't care about your politics. We only care about the people dying in those escape pods while we debate." The blunt honesty of her statement seemed to penetrate the aliens' defensive assumptions. For the first time in 3,000 years of warfare, both sides were faced with someone who simply didn't see them as enemies. They were just two groups of people who needed help. After more discussion between the commanders and their staffs, a grudging agreement was reached. The humans would be allowed to conduct rescue operations, but under strict supervision. Escort ships from both fleets would monitor their activities, and any aggressive action would result in immediate destruction. For the next 12 hours, the Meridian worked tirelessly to save lives. Dr. Kim and her medical team treated wounded Kethvar and Zephyrians side by side in the ship's medical bay. Their professional dedication, Overcoming language barriers and species differences, marine rescue teams piloted shuttles through debris fields to reach damaged escape pods, pulling survivors from the wreckage regardless of which fleet they belonged to. The alien escort crews watched in amazement as humans risked their lives repeatedly to save beings they had never met before. They saw wounded HFY warriors sharing medical equipment with injured Zephyrian pilots. They watched human doctors work for hours to save a single alien life, then immediately begin treating the next patient with the same intensity. Most shocking of all, they observed the rescued survivors. HFY and Zephyrian casualties lying in adjacent beds began to see each other not as monsters, but as fellow beings who had suffered and survived. Conversations started hesitantly, translated through the ship's computer systems. Stories were shared. For the first time in millennia, members of both species looked at their supposed enemies and saw people. When the rescue operations concluded, Captain Chen called both commanders again. "We've recovered all the survivors we could locate. Our medical team reports that most will make full recoveries. We're ready to transfer them back to your respective fleets." "You would return our warriors without ransom or demands?" asked Theska, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "They're not prisoners," Chen replied. "They're patients who need to return home to heal properly. That's all." As the human shuttles returned the survivors to their ships, word of what had happened spread through both fleets. The story seemed impossible, but too many warriors had witnessed it to be denied. Aliens who cared more about saving lives than winning battles. Strangers who risked everything for people they had never met. For the first time in 3,000 years, the eternal war had been interrupted by something stronger than hatred. Simple human compassion. And in the medical bay of a small Earth ship, wounded enemies had become something their species had forgotten how to be. They had become friends. Admiral Marcus Torres stood before the Earth Colonial Council, his weathered face showing every one of his 62 years. The council chamber was a simple room compared to the grand halls of other galactic powers, but it represented something more important than luxury. It represented humanity's determination to forge its own path among the stars. "You want to do what?" asked Counselor Martinez, her voice rising in disbelief. Around the circular table, the other 11 council members showed similar expressions of shock and concern. "I want to mediate the HFY-Zephyrian conflict," Torres repeated calmly. "Captain Chen's mission report makes it clear that both species are capable of reason when they're not blinded by hatred. We have an opportunity to end a war that has consumed the galaxy for 3 millennia. Counselor Jackson, a former military officer himself, leaned forward. "Marcus, with all due respect, you've lost your mind. The Galactic Council just declared this conflict irreconcilable. 15 experienced mediators have died trying to broker peace. What makes you think humanity can succeed where every other species has failed?" Torres had expected this reaction. The proposal did sound insane on the surface. Earth controlled only 12 star systems compared to the hundreds controlled by each warring empire. Humanity had been part of galactic civilization for less than a century, while the HFY and Zephyrians had been fighting since before humans developed agriculture. But Torres understood something about warfare that the galactic powers had forgotten. He had fought in the colonial wars, the brutal conflicts that had nearly torn humanity apart before the Treaty of Geneva ended the violence. He had seen enemies become allies when they found common ground. He knew that sometimes the most intractable conflicts could be resolved by the simple act of caring more about peace than politics. "Because we have nothing to lose," Torres said simply. "Every other species has economic interests, political relationships, historical grudges that complicate their mediation attempts. We're newcomers with no baggage. We can approach this conflict with fresh eyes and honest intentions. We also have no authority," pointed out Counselor Kim. "Why would 2 ancient empires listen to us? We're barely more than a regional power." "Authority has to be earned," Torres replied. "And sometimes it has to be taken." Captain Chen's crew earned respect by treating alien wounded with the same care they would give to human casualties. Now we need to build on that foundation. He activated a holographic display showing the current state of the war. Red zones marked active combat areas. Yellow zones showed contested territories, and green zones indicated the few neutral systems where neither empire held sway. The map painted a picture of devastating conflict spreading across dozens of sectors. "Look at this," Torres continued. Both empires are exhausting themselves fighting this war. Their economies are strained, their populations are war-weary, and their military forces are spread thin across too many fronts. They continue fighting because they don't know how to stop without losing face. So how exactly do you propose to end it? Asked Counselor Davis. Ask them nicely to stop shooting each other? Torres smiled grimly. No, we're going to make them stop shooting each other. Earth will deploy its largest fleet ever assembled to the war zone. We'll establish a neutral zone between the combatants and enforce it with overwhelming military superiority. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Several counselors began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of objections and concerns. This wasn't just ambitious, it was potentially suicidal. Humanity's entire space fleet was smaller than either empire's home defense forces. You're talking about taking on two galactic superpowers simultaneously, shouted Counselor Rodriguez over the noise. They'll destroy our fleet and then come for Earth itself. Not if we're smart about it, Torres replied, raising his voice to be heard. We won't fight them on their terms. We'll use speed, surprise, and superior tactics to level the playing field. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable than theirs. Our weapons are more efficient. Most importantly, our crews have something their warriors have forgotten, the ability to adapt and improvise. He pulled up tactical analyses that Earth's military planners had been developing since first contact with galactic civilization. While other species had grown complacent with their ancient technologies and rigid battle doctrines, humanity had continued to innovate. Earth's engineers had spent decades studying alien ship designs, looking for weaknesses and developing countermeasures. We won't be fighting to conquer territory or destroy their civilizations, Torres explained. We'll be fighting to create space for diplomacy. Hit them hard enough to get their attention, then offer them something they want more than victory. An honorable way to end the war. Counselor Liu, the eldest member of the council, spoke for the first time. Even if your plan works militarily, what makes you think you can negotiate a lasting peace? These species have hated each other for 3,000 years. Because they've forgotten why they started fighting in the first place, Torres answered. Captain Chen's report shows that individual Kethvar and Zephyrians can get along fine when they're not being told to hate each other. The war has become self-perpetuating, fed by politicians and war profiteers who benefit from the conflict. He brought up another display, this one showing economic data from both empires. Military spending consumed enormous percentages of their gross domestic products. Entire industries had grown up around the war effort. Millions of jobs depended on continued conflict. This is what we're really fighting, Torres said, pointing to the economic charts. Not ancient hatred, but modern greed. There are people on both sides who get rich from this war. They're the ones who sabotage peace negotiations and restart conflicts whenever things get too quiet. So what's your solution? Asked Counselor Martinez. We give both sides something they want more than war, Torres replied. Trade opportunities, technological exchanges, cultural programs. We show them that cooperation is more profitable than conflict. And we make it clear that any return to warfare will be met with swift retaliation from Earth's fleet. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors worried about the risk to human lives and ships. Others questioned whether humanity had the moral right to interfere in an alien conflict. A few suggested that Earth should focus on building its own strength rather than playing galactic peacekeeper. But slowly, Torres began to win them over. He shared intelligence reports showing how the war was destabilizing entire sectors, threatening trade routes and causing refugee crises. He presented economic projections demonstrating how peace would create opportunities for human businesses and colonies. Most importantly, he appealed to humanity's deepest values, the belief that every person deserved to live in peace and security. The final vote was close, 7 in favor, 5 opposed. It was enough to authorize the mission, but Torres knew he would have to prove himself quickly or face recall. Within weeks, Earth's shipyards were working around the clock to prepare the fleet. Every available vessel was pressed into service, from the massive carrier UES Prometheus to the smallest patrol craft. The fleet included humanity's most advanced warships, but also hospital ships, supply vessels, and transports carrying diplomats and humanitarian aid workers. The crews that volunteered for the mission knew they might not return home. They were flying into the galaxy's most dangerous war zone to attempt something that wiser species had declared impossible. But they went anyway, driven by the same spirit that had led Captain Chen to risk her ship for alien strangers. As the fleet prepared to depart, Torres stood on the bridge of the Prometheus looking out at the assembled ships. Humanity's entire space navy stretched before him. 847 vessels carrying the hopes and determination of an entire species. Admiral, called his communications officer, we're receiving good luck messages from colonies throughout human space. Also, Captain Chen requests permission to join the fleet with the Meridian. Granted, Torres replied without hesitation. She started this. She should be there to see it finished. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it humanity's first attempt at galactic diplomacy. They were flying toward a war that had consumed civilizations, armed with nothing but superior technology and an unshakable belief that any problem could be solved if the right people tried hard enough. Behind them, Earth waited and hoped. Ahead of them, the eternal war burned on, unaware that its days were numbered. Humanity was coming to mediate whether anyone wanted them to or not. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Nexus system like a thunderclap in the void. 847 ships of various sizes materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of the system's twin stars. At the center of the formation, the massive carrier UES Prometheus cast a shadow large enough to eclipse a small moon. Admiral Torres stood on the Prometheus's bridge, watching as his tactical officers updated the fleet's position. The Nexus system was the heart of the war zone, home to major military installations for both the Kethavar and Zephyrian empires. Hundreds of alien warships patrolled the system's outer edges, maintaining an uneasy balance of power that had existed for decades. Sir, we're detecting over 400 Kethavar vessels in the northern sector, reported Commander Walsh from the tactical station. Southern sector shows approximately 350 Zephyrian ships. Both fleets are moving to intercept us. Torres nodded grimly. He had expected this response. No military commander would allow an unknown fleet to enter their most important system without challenge. The fact that both empires were moving against the humans simultaneously showed how seriously they took this unprecedented intrusion. Communications. Open a channel on all frequencies, Torres ordered. It's time to make our intentions clear. The bridge fell silent as Torres prepared to deliver humanity's ultimatum to two of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If he could convince both sides to listen, there might be hope for peace. If not, Earth's entire fleet could be destroyed in the next few hours. Attention all vessels in the Nexus system, Torres began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships in battle for over 30 years. This is Admiral Marcus Torres of the Earth Colonial Defense Force. I am speaking on behalf of humanity and the planet Earth. He paused, letting the translation systems convert his words into dozens of alien languages. Around the system, crews on hundreds of ships were hearing these words for the first time, trying to understand what this new species wanted. The war between the Kethavar Collective and the Zephyrian Empire ends now, Torres continued. Both fleets will withdraw to neutral positions beyond the system's outer markers within 6 hours. Any act of aggression after that deadline will be met with overwhelming force. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The response was immediate and predictable. Angry transmissions flooded the communications array from both fleets. Kethavar commanders demanded to know what gave humanity the right to issue ultimatums. Zephyrian officers threatened to destroy the human fleet for its arrogance. Neither side showed any intention of backing down. On the Kethavar command ship, Queen Admiral Thessica studied the sensor readings with growing disbelief. These are the same humans who rescued our warriors 6 months ago? They dare threaten the might of the collective with such a small fleet? Her tactical officer, Krex, clicked his mandibles nervously. Your Magnificence, our analysis shows their ships are more advanced than we initially believed. Their power signatures suggest weapons and defensive systems beyond our current technology. Impossible, Thessica hissed. They are a primitive species. We have been spacefaring for 10,000 years while they have barely left their home system. But even as she spoke, detailed scans were revealing disturbing information about the human vessels. Their hulls incorporated materials that absorbed energy weapons. Their engines produced thrust ratios that should have been impossible with known technology. Most concerning of all, Their weapon systems showed efficiency ratings that exceeded anything in the Kethvar arsenal. Across the system, Fleet Coordinator Vex Thul was receiving similar reports from his science officers. The Zephyrian computers were having difficulty analyzing human technology, as if it operated on principles that their databases couldn't recognize. "How is this possible?" Vex Thul demanded, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. "6 months ago we dismissed them as harmless explorers. Now they claim they can defeat both our fleets simultaneously?" His aide, Scythex, pulsed with uncertainty. "Coordinator, perhaps they are bluffing. Their fleet is large for such a young species, but they are still vastly outnumbered. Logic suggests they cannot win a direct confrontation. Logic also suggested they had no reason to rescue our enemies," Vex Thul replied. "These humans seem to operate by different rules than the rest of the galaxy." As the 6-hour deadline approached, both alien fleets made their decision. Pride and military doctrine demanded that they respond to the human challenge with force. No species, regardless of their technology, could be allowed to dictate terms to ancient galactic powers. The combined alien fleet that moved against humanity numbered over 700 ships. Biovessels and crystal ships formed a pincer movement designed to crush the human fleet between overwhelming firepower. It was the largest concentration of military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. Admiral Torres watched the tactical display as the alien armada approached. His officers reported ready status from all ships, but he could see the tension on their faces. They were about to engage two civilizations that had been perfecting the art of war for millennia. "All ships execute Protocol 7, Torres commanded. "Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to prove a point." What followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as a masterpiece of tactical innovation. The human fleet didn't fight like any force the aliens had encountered before. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on in traditional battle formations, they broke into smaller units that used speed and coordination to devastating effect. Human ships moved in three-dimensional patterns that confused alien targeting systems. They struck from unexpected angles, disappeared into sensor shadows, and reappeared where they were least expected. Earth's weapons proved terrifyingly effective against alien defenses that had been designed to counter each other. Not to deal with human innovation, the Kethvar bioships, with their living hulls and regenerative capabilities, found themselves helpless against human kinetic weapons that punched through their organic armor like tissue paper. The Zephyrian crystal vessels, protected by energy shields that had withstood the collective's bioweapons for millennia, discovered that human particle beams operated at frequencies that made their defenses useless. But it wasn't just superior technology that won the battle. Human crews had trained for scenarios that alien commanders couldn't imagine. They adapted their tactics in real time, sharing information instantly across the fleet and responding to threats with a flexibility that rigid alien doctrines couldn't match. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, 60% of the combined alien fleet had been disabled or destroyed. The remaining ships fled to the system's outer edges, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. Most remarkably, the human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. A few vessels showed damage from lucky hits, but Earth's superior point defense systems and energy shields had protected them from serious harm. It was the most one-sided victory in recorded galactic history. In the aftermath, as rescue ships moved to collect alien survivors, Admiral Torres opened another communication channel. His voice was calm, showing no triumph or gloating over the victory. "The demonstration is complete," he announced. "Both fleets have seen what happens when they choose war over peace. Earth's offer remains open. Withdraw to neutral positions and begin peace negotiations, or face the continued presence of our fleet in this system." The response this time was very different. Shaken alien commanders, their military pride broken by the devastating defeat, began to consider options other than continued warfare. For the first time in 3,000 years, the idea of negotiating with enemies seemed preferable to facing these terrifying humans in battle. Queen Admiral Thessica was the first to respond. Her voice carried none of its earlier arrogance. "Admiral Torres, the Kethvar Collective requests discussions regarding your proposal." Fleet Coordinator Vex Thul's transmission followed minutes later. "The Zephyrian Empire is willing to consider your terms for a temporary ceasefire." Torres allowed himself a small smile. The hardest part was over. He had proven that humanity could back up its words with action. Now came the real challenge, turning military victory into lasting peace. Both delegations will meet aboard the UES Prometheus in 12 hours, he announced. We have work to do. The Eternal War had finally met a force it couldn't defeat, not through superior numbers or ancient hatred, but through human determination and the simple belief that any problem could be solved if the right people were willing to try hard enough. The age of mediation was about to begin. The conference room aboard the UES Prometheus had been carefully designed for this historic moment. Human engineers had worked for weeks to create a space where two species, who had been mortal enemies for 3 millennia, could sit together safely. The circular table was made of neutral materials, with each delegation positioned equal distances from the others. Environmental controls maintained atmospheric conditions suitable for all 3 species. Admiral Torres sat between the 2 alien delegations, watching as they sized each other up with barely concealed hostility. Queen Admiral Thessica led the Kethvar representatives, her forearms folded in a pose that managed to be both defensive and threatening. Across from her, Fleet Coordinator Vexthol's crystalline form flickered with patterns that the translation computer marked as aggressive suspicion. Before we begin, Torres said, his voice cutting through the tension, let me make something clear. You are here because your fleets were defeated, not because you suddenly decided to love each other. I don't expect you to become friends overnight. I just expect you to act like civilized beings for the next few hours. Both alien leaders shifted uncomfortably at the blunt reminder of their military humiliation. The Battle of Nexus had shattered their confidence in their own military superiority, and forced them to acknowledge that humanity was a power that demanded respect. What exactly do you want from us? Thessica asked, her mandibles clicking with irritation. You have proven your military strength. Now what are your terms for victory? I don't want victory, Torres replied simply. I want peace. There's a difference. He activated a holographic display showing the economic cost of the war over the past century. The numbers were staggering. Trillions of credits spent on weapons, millions of lives lost, entire star systems rendered uninhabitable by prolonged conflict. Look at what this war has cost both your civilizations, Torres continued. Your economies are strained to the breaking point. Your populations are war-weary. Your best young people die in battles over territories that have changed hands dozens of times. What do either of you have to show for 3,000 years of fighting? Vexthol pulsed with defensive patterns. The Collective started this war with their expansion into sovereign Zephyrian space. We have fought to defend our people and our territory. The Empire invaded our ancestral breeding grounds first, Thessica shot back. We have every right to reclaim what was stolen from us. Stop, Torres said firmly. This is exactly the problem. You're so busy arguing about who started the war that you've forgotten how to end it. Do either of you even remember what you were originally fighting about? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Both delegates consulted with their advisors, but the truth was obvious to everyone in the room. The original causes of the war had been lost to history, buried under millennia of accumulated grievances and propaganda. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, Earth's chief xenopsychologist, leaned forward from her position at Torres's side. Admiral, if I may? At his nod, she addressed both delegations. Our research teams have spent the past 6 months studying your conflict. We've analyzed historical records, cultural documents, and economic data from both civilizations. She brought up a new display showing population genetics and migration patterns from 3,000 years ago. The irony is that your species aren't even fighting over territory that originally belonged to either of you. The systems you've been destroying each other over were originally inhabited by a third species, the Veltar, who went extinct from a plague 2 millennia before your war started. The revelation hit both delegations like a physical blow. They had been fighting and dying over the territories of a dead civilization, land that neither side had any legitimate claim to. The waste and futility of it all was overwhelming. Furthermore, Dr. Reyes continued, our analysis shows that your species are naturally compatible. Kethavar biotechnology and Zephyrian crystal working could complement each other perfectly. Your trading routes could create prosperity for both civilizations if you worked together, instead of destroying each other's ships. Impossible, Vexthul protested. The bugs are our natural enemies. We could never coexist. The crystals are cold-blooded killers, Thessica added. They have no honor, no concept of mercy. Torres had expected this reaction. Breaking down 3 millennia of hatred would take more than logic and economic incentives. He signaled to Captain Chen, who had been waiting outside the conference room. "I'd like you to meet some people," Torres said as the doors opened. Captain Chen entered, followed by a small group of beings that made both alien delegations freeze in shock. The group consisted of Kethvar and Zephyrian survivors from the Battle 6. Months ago, the same individuals who had been rescued by Chen's crew and treated aboard the Meridian. But they weren't standing on opposite sides of the room glaring at each other. They were standing together, talking quietly, some even showing what appeared to be friendship. These individuals spent weeks recovering aboard Captain Chen's ship, Torres explained. They shared the same medical bay, ate the same food, faced the same challenges. And something remarkable happened. They discovered that they're not monsters. They're just people who happen to be born on different worlds. A young Kethvar warrior named Krixa stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. "Your Magnificence," he said to Thessica. "I have shared meals with Zephyrian pilots. I have heard their stories of home and family. They love their children as we love ours. They fear death as we do. They are not the demons we were taught to hate." On the other side, a Zephyrian engineer named Prixel pulsed with patterns of deep conviction. "Fleet coordinator, the Kethvar saved my life when my pod's life support failed. They carried me to safety when they could have left me to die. How can we call them heartless beasts when they show such compassion?" The impact on both delegations was profound. These weren't enemy propaganda or human lies. These were their own people, warriors they knew and trusted, telling them that everything they believed about their enemies was wrong. Torres pressed his advantage. "The war has continued because it serves the interests of a small group of people on both sides who profit from the conflict. Military contractors, weapons manufacturers, politicians who build their careers on fear and hatred. They're the ones who sabotage peace negotiations and restart fighting whenever it threatens to end." He brought up financial records that human intelligence had gathered, showing the flow of money from war-related industries to political leaders on both sides. The corruption was extensive and well documented. "These are the real enemies of peace," Torres continued. "Not your species, but the individuals who get rich from your suffering. Earth's proposal is simple. We help you identify and remove these war profiteers while providing economic incentives for cooperation instead of conflict." The negotiations that followed lasted for 3 days. There were heated arguments, walkouts, and moments when it seemed like the talks would collapse entirely. But gradually, with patient human mediation, a framework for peace began to emerge. The Treaty of Terra, as it came to be called, established several key principles. First, both empires would withdraw their forces from the disputed territories, which would be administered jointly under human oversight. Second, an extensive prisoner exchange would return captured warriors to their homes. Third, trade agreements would be established to demonstrate the economic benefits of cooperation. Most importantly, the treaty included provisions for identifying and prosecuting war criminals on both sides, the individuals who had deliberately prolonged the conflict for personal gain. Human investigators would work with both governments to root out corruption and ensure that those responsible for unnecessary deaths would face justice. The signing ceremony took place in the same conference room where the negotiations had begun. Queen Admiral Thessica and Fleet Coordinator Vexthul affixed their seals to the document with obvious reluctance, but their signatures were legally binding. "This is just the beginning," Torres told the assembled delegates. "Peace isn't something you sign once and forget about. It's something you have to work at every day. Earth stands ready to help both your civilizations build a better future." As news of the treaty spread throughout the galaxy, the reaction was one of stunned disbelief. The Galactic Council, which had declared the conflict irreconcilable, found themselves faced with humanity's achievement. A species barely a century old had succeeded where ancient civilizations had failed. The economic benefits of peace became apparent within months. Trade routes that had been closed for millennia reopened under human protection. Kethvar biotechnology and Zephyrian crystal working created innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Refugee populations began returning to their homeworlds for the first time in generations, but perhaps the most important change was cultural. The survivors who had been treated aboard human ships became ambassadors for peace, sharing their experiences and helping their people see former enemies as potential friends. Educational exchanges began, allowing young Kethvar and Zephyrians to learn about each other's cultures without the filter of military propaganda.